of course, the league was also in the headlines too because you decided to make the rule changes about fighting. You said you got messages of congratulations when you made the schedule announcement. What was the response like to that change, and how did all that discussion go down leading up to the rule change?
A little bit less congratulations from the West.
Okay.
You guys can read social media. I did not read it. I was told about it. Well, to me, that was, first of all, that was coming in. It was actually before I came in. I was announced in March, if you remember, and took over in May. But when we were discussing the mandate with the owners, I was pretty straightforward on that, on where I stood. So there was no surprises, but the owners were there, I think. So I just happened to come at the end of the conversation. It was 15 years in the making, actually. If you go back to 2005 or 6, I believe was I'm going to use the word worst, like the worst year, like 700 fights. For your view, reminding everyone, 612 games.
Right.
So more than one game, a fight a game. Then it started to go down. There was that famous goalie fight, if you remember, in 2008. And that was sort of a little bit of a tipping point. And then new rules were enforced. And again in 2016, and every time. So last year we were down to 106 fights. I always include preseason. So 106 fights and about 687 games. And so we just fast forwarded. I said, a lot of people were saying, you're like... there's an expression that say you're kicking open doors. I don't know if that translates. You know, you're already there.
Right.
You have much less fights than the other league. Just let it go. And you can look at this and say, yes, so we have much less fight than the other leagues. So why not just end it? Because it won't be a great disturbance. And we did the rule. And so, no, to me, I was one of the few, maybe, very happy with that rule. It goes with taking care of the kids, whether they like it or not. I mean, that's part of it. And at the end of the day, we were told, beware, you'll have less fans, cheap shots. That's the usual arguments. Well, now first of all, let's step back a little bit before I go to my stats. The entire world doesn't fight. Europe doesn't fight, doesn't allow fighting. NCAA doesn't allow fighting. They even play with full face, right? If I understand correctly. So let's start there. And there's 50% of those in the NHL. So when a scout comes to me and says things that some of them said always without naming themselves, so it's always that anonymous source. I don't have huge respect for that, because if you have an opinion, say it, and it's okay, But come and defend it, and tell me why. The NHL, they do what they want. Different story. Adults, all of them, and they earn a living. It's a professional. It's different. Here we have as much guys who will be accountants as there'll be actually more accountants and hockey players, most likely. So we have to be just mindful of where we are in the stage of development. Nobody fights before they get to junior, So the Europeans that come over, so the argument to me that you need to prep for the NHL, well, who's the darling of it's the USA that taken a lot of the Canadian market shares over the past 20 years in terms of hockey players, percentage that they originate from in the NHL. These leagues don't fight. So something doesn't jive, So basically, to me, that was all points that make it much easier to go to that rule. And after 550 odd games, 91% this morning as we talk of the season gone, we have growth in our audience by 5% overall. In the Maritimes here in Cape Breton, I think it's 20% over last year, the attendance. So I won't say case closed, but these are facts now. This is a case study. These are facts. And suspensions are about the same as last year number-wise, and less games suspended. So we haven't seen any surge at all of what people are saying. And I know, because I think that generation of kids, that's not what they want to show off. So that, to me, the conversation was all about that, was all about butt heads to a certain extent. But within the ownership structure, those who actually had to vote, some people were not Today we're afraid of the business side of it. How it's going to look. Are we going to get less drafted? You make the case. Right now, nobody talks to me about it anymore. Great game last night. You know, we get good skills. You see the guys actually taking their player finishing their body check or taking him out of the play. You don't need a high stick in the face. You don't need a cheap shot. You don't need to fight. I mean, it's just the way it is. And if a guy does his job, a good shoulder hit, and it's spectacular, and you fall on your back and you lose your stick, but it's all legal, why should he fight because he did his job, right? Why should he have to turn around and so I understand the whole. I know just so people are aware. I know we're talking about culture and changing it, but there's many ways. Back in my days, you would take the number. Okay, that's number 18. Third period he's gonna come along the boards at one point. I'll give him a good body check. Just remind him, you don't need to put stick to the face. You don't need to do the cheap shots, and you don't need to fight, in my view.